All right, the last video was just a clown on BK, but let's have a very serious discussion here that I would like to kind of engage in here, and because some Hebrew Israelites are very interested in enlightening me. And if you want to enlighten me or try, that's fine. Okay, I'll tell you this: I'll be as open-minded as I can. But look, man, I'm a when it comes to critical thinking, I really tend to dissect things. And there's a lot of holes in this Hebrew Israelite doctrine. There's a lot of holes in it. Right? Now, the argument always is no, there's not. It's all in the Bible, it's all prophecy. Let me read you the verse. I get it. You find verses that are either convenient, or just perceive your argument as truth. I get it, right? I get it. You read the Bible a lot. I get it. If I make an argument, you're going to find something in the Bible that either counters it or supports your specific argument. I get it, right? I get that you know a lot of verses. I get that if I make a claim, you're going to ask me, where does it say that on the Bible? If we use only the Bible as a source, right? I know I'm not going to win that argument. I will concede that. All right? I know more about the Bible than most. I don't think. I'll give the Hebrew Israelites this. All right? I'll give them this. Although there are still elements you know, of hypocrisy, and there's some elements you know, what's the word I'm looking for? Of contradiction, right? There's still elements of it, but nonetheless, they're a lot more consistent with the Bible than most people out there that claim they're religious, right? When it comes to the Bible, I own a Bible, right? I think it has a lot of good verses in it, right? But it has a lot of things that are very immoral in it, and it has a lot of things that are moral in it. I think we use our own judgments as humans to pick out what we feel um, is beneficial to us, right? Us as in the particular individual making the particular argument or making a justification for their specific belief, right? Well, we'll just kind of leave it at that. But when it comes to the Hebrew Israelites, they're very consistent, right, with what they believe. Okay? Like, it's hard to call them hypocrites, right? Not to say that there's no such thing as a Hebrew Israelite that's a hypocrite, right? There is. But at a macro level, right, when you look at the grand scheme of it, they're not as they don't tend to be as big of hypocrites as I've seen with a lot of Christians and now they have nothing to do with the specific Bible, although they acknowledge the book. But Muslims, right? They have their Quran, but they still acknowledge the Bible. Um, they still acknowledge Christians and Jews as people of the book, etc. Right? Um, but I'm kind of chilling off here. I am, but I think if you're going to use the Bible, right, as this, let's call it the ultimate truth, right? Then we have to, unless we're going to get ourselves into this circular reasoning, which happens a lot. It happens a lot with the Hebrew Israelites, okay? There's this circular reasoning. So anything you question or anything you ask, they have a Bible verse for it, right? And if you question that Bible verse, they have another Bible verse for it, right? I get that you have the verses for it, right? I mean, I understand that. I get it. But what I'm asking for is what is the source to the Bible? Who wrote the book? Who wrote the book? Right? There are several questions I have for people that follow the Bible, right? If you follow the Bible, there's nothing wrong with that, especially if you're not hurting anybody, right? So I'm not talking in terms of whether you're hurting somebody or whether you're doing harm, okay? I'm not even talking about what the intentions are, right? If you have good intentions and you want to help people out, that's great, right? Anything you do in life, if it's having a positive influence on others, by all means, continue doing it, right? However, this discussion is not about whether it's good or bad what you're doing. The discussion is not even if it's moral or immoral, right? The discussion is whether your doctrine is true. So when it comes to the history of the Bible, now Hebrew Israelites used, from my understanding, right? But if I'm wrong about anything, or you believe I'm wrong, this is dialogue, right? But from my understanding, they use the King James Version of the Bible, right? Now, the King James Version, even the ones that they use right now, has been modified in different editions since the days of King James. Now, there is no evidence that suggests that King James himself translated, the Bible into the King James Version. There's no proof of that, right? I'm just going to concede and say, let's say he did, right? You can't prove he did. You can't prove he didn't, right? I mean, I'll compare it a lot to, just take a quick example. When you have guys, like these celebrities that put out these books, especially let's say, I'm not really talking about Hollywood celebrities, although they're out there, but they put out biographies or something. But let's say like Bill O'Reilly, right? The political commentator from Fox News puts out a book called Killing Kennedy, Killing Reagan. He didn't actually write the book himself. However, the writer and Bill O'Reilly themselves agree that if he says he wrote it, and if he kind of assists in the process, right, they're going to get more sales out of it, right? King James was a king, right? So I find it extremely hard to believe that he actually did it himself. But if they were to translate it into the King James Version, right, then I can see how that would be more meaningful than some random dude that he had translated for him. Okay, I mean, it's no different to like when you're the king, all right? Kings took credit for winning wars when they never fought in the actual wars, right? They never have actually wielded a sword. And I'm not saying that no king ever did, but just in general, just to kind of make a point. Kings took glory for winning wars that they never really participated in, right? So, I mean, this could be kind of similar to that. But let's just for the sake of argument, to kind of save us time, let's concede, okay, that King James translated the Bible, right? Let's just concede that point. I think the big leap here, like the drastic leap, which, in all honesty, I have a hard time understanding historically. I honestly do. The leap is, and the truth is, Hebrew Israelites, right? Anytime you keep going back, when you go back on the timeline, right? Well, tell me something about whatever, X. They have a Bible verse for it. Well, what justifies that verse? Well, the Bible does. Well, do you know where the Bible comes from? Oh, don't worry, a black man, a king that was black, translated the Bible. Right? Now, notice how I'm going to concede a lot of this stuff, and you're still going to have a little issue, convincing me here. But King James, I think, all historical scholars agree he was white, without question. It's not really up for debate. But I understand that the argument is, no, well, that's That's what they want you to believe. That's what they put out there. I understand that's the argument, right? Now, here's my thing. This is what I kind of look at. Let me just do it this way, right? Even if I were to concede that it was black, right? I mean, I'm conceding points that have not been proven yet. But let's say I concede it. Let's say I concede that King James is black, right? Whether he's black or he's not. I think you're going to have a very difficult time, proving to me or explaining to me why he was involved in a slave trade. That is something that you're going to have an extremely difficult time explaining to me why he was involved in a slave trade. Right? Now, let's say you have an argument for that. Right? Here I'm conceding another one. Let's say you come up with a great argument. It might be something like, oh, well, it was part of prophecy. Or it was out of his control. I mean, he was a king, but, whatever. Now, before you say why it wasn't, a lot of times people get lost in timelines, right? The slave trade was going on then, when King James was king. When a lot of the first, settlers were coming, they were named, like Jamestown and stuff like that, right? We all know pilgrims are showing up, and we know that they were white, right? And we know who their king was. So, but let's say I concede, right? Let's say I concede that he had nothing to do with it. I'm still trying to figure out how, when the slave trade was going on, right? One of the worst things that's ever happened in humanity's history. Okay. How did they know? Like, for example, I'm just trying to figure this out. When the slave trade was going on, they were grabbing people against their will, right? In many cases in Africa, and then they would sell them to the Europeans. How did they know? How did they know? Okay, let's just line them up. Okay, you're Judah, you're this, you're that, right? We're gonna take these specific ones. We're gonna take them to, to the 13 colonies. They'll be the African Americans in future. These specific ones, let's send them to Puerto Rico. These specific ones, from this, we know they're from this tribe. Let's take them to Haiti. Like, why were people that were picking apart families and destroying families and putting people on ships against their will, why were they taking the time to specifically and deliberately divide all these slaves? And they knew specifically that these specific slaves were from specific tribes, from the lost tribes of Israel. That's what I want to explain, right? Even conceding point after point that has not been proven, I'm conceding it. I'm not even asking you to prove that. That's what I want to know. And what about the slaves that were sent to India and they were sent to different parts of the world? Why were these terrible people that were, separating, all these families and taking in these slaves? Why were they, in a weird, ironic way being, I guess you can say, I don't even know what the word is, courteous enough to say, well, we're going to make sure we keep the tribes together, though. We're just going to make sure we keep them all lined up. And I'm not even talking about the other tribes that were already here, right? Like the Native Americans. It's just so vague, like the northern Native Americans. There was so many tribes. We know that the Native Americans came from up north, right? If you follow DNA, right, we know that that they came from up north, right? from, in the Ice Age. And but okay, let's say that's all conspiracy. I just want this is what I want to know, right? Anyway, they migrated from up north, to the bottom of North America, eventually Central America, and down to South America. But I just I want to understand right now. I'm trying to understand how they specifically knew. Like, I'm not talking about how the Mexicans knew to stick. I mean, I couldn't pick that one apart fairly easily, right? Because Mexicans, quote unquote, is a nationality, but it was borders that were created, right after the Spaniards were, it was called New Spain, right? And then they were written out. Parts of the lands were taken away from the U.S. in the Mexican War, but the borders were created, right? Like, there was different tribes up north of Native Americans. They were just all picked apart and destroyed, and and killed. The same thing, in South America. They already had their own borders, but they were separated by the white man. So I want that explained. Peace.